I just had the opportunity to check out Indiana Jones and the Order of the Giants, the DLC coming to the Great Circle, and it's more Indiana Jones, and that is a great thing. So I played roughly 45 minutes of the DLC starting from the beginning, and there are 4 big takeaways I have. So first, the DLC is integrated in the main story. Once you get to the Vatican, you can start this DLC. Second, once you leave the Vatican, the story takes place on the streets of Rome and below the streets. They really emphasize that you will be going underground for a good portion of this DLC. Third point, it's still very cinematic and there are plenty of puzzles. During the 45 minutes I played, there was only 1 combat encounter and you didn't do a whole lot. Most of it were puzzles and exploration. Finally, if you've already finished Indiana Jones and the Great Circle or you've made it pretty far, you can still travel back to the Vatican to start this quest. Additionally, depending on when you decide to do this, the difficulty will adapt. So if you finish the game, you've got all your upgrades, in theory, the game should be a little tougher to match your skill. And like I said, it takes place within the story rather than being a separate experience. So what I mean by that, a lot of DLC, once you finish the game, you'll unlock a separate chapter that you can load into. It's not the case with this. Once you get to the Vatican, you'll meet a character named Father Ricci and a parrot named Pio, and they kind of kick things off. You go under the Vatican, and then you eventually get to the streets of Rome, where you can explore another semi-open world area. From what they said, it's not the biggest sandbox in the game, but it should take roughly around 6 hours to get through this. Of course, they said it could take longer if you're one of those players who needs to look at every detail. And with Indiana Jones, the Great Circle, that's kind of how I was, so I'm expecting this will take me a little longer than what they said. That said, I never got to go to Rome in this preview. The very first part took place in the Vatican. I had to sneak up into a window with the help of the bird, got a key, and then was able to enter a part of the Vatican that was previously closed off. From inside there, you head underground and you find a helmet that kind of keeps leading you further and further underground. Like I said, there wasn't a lot of combat, however, there were 2 bigger puzzles and a lot of traversal puzzles. If you like the puzzles in Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, chances are you'll like the ones here. I'd say the biggest puzzle of the preview that I saw was one where basically you were rerouting water through a certain area in order to get water to different places. And the way you did this is you had this giant scepter thing you'd stick in the ground and then you'd rotate, but you couldn't see where the water was going at all times, so you kind of had to follow environmental clues in order to lead the water through this area and then open up the door. I wouldn't say they're tough, but they'll definitely force you to stop, think, look around, take in the environment, and figure out how to go forward. Other than that, there was a lot of traversal and platforming similar to what we saw in the Great Circle, where you'd use your whip to hook onto things, swing, grab onto ledges, sidle along the edge, hang from ledges, and move through the environment. And like I said before, this does have adaptive difficulty. The reason being that if you have finished the main game, you can still go back and do this with all your power-ups, and the game will adjust accordingly to it. Obviously, I didn't get to try that out because I had a preset build that I had to play off of, and there wasn't really any combat challenges anyway. So it's hard to say how that works in-game. So for folks who played the Great Circle, this will be a very familiar experience, but I think that's a good thing. You'll be reading a lot of notes, you'll be referencing your notebook, you'll be exploring the environment. Doesn't seem very combat heavy. That said, I'm sure there is combat. Some of the screenshots and gameplay they showed us did include combat. It's in the main game, wouldn't be surprised if it's there, but it feels like it's paced very similarly and that you're doing a lot of exploring, you're solving puzzles, and occasionally you might get into a scrap or 2. And that's about all I saw of Indiana Jones and the Order of Giants. Be sure to keep an eye out because we're going to cover it more leading up to release on September 4th. And you know, when you think about it, video games have come a long way since Pac-Man.